Welcome to another episode of Tea Talk. Today, our guest is Kevin. Let's ask the very important question first. Kevin, where are you from?
Oh dear, that's a loaded question. I am from Europe. I'm from Antwerp. I'm from Asia. I'm from Hong Kong. I'm from Flanders. I'm a whole lot of things, I think.
I'm going to talk with you today about intergenerational uh, miscommunication or just communication in general.
We do have those, yeah.
Yeah, what's the relationship with your parents?
It's good. I like to think it's good. First of all, it's very different, I think, because my parents got divorced when I was about 3 or 4 years old, so I don't really remember them being together.
Mm-hmm.
And my dad is very more conservative, in the sense that he likes to hold on to his roots. He doesn't speak the language, for example. He doesn't really have Belgian friends. Whereas my mom, she assimilated. She didn't even integrate. She assimilated.
Mm-hmm.
She's definitely like what they call a banana, and that's kind of the way she raised me. What I want to say by what I mean by that is that with my dad, I have a more distant relationship, which is more common amongst Chinese parent-child relationships. Whereas with my mom, I'm able to communicate a bit more, I think, because she has some of the Western values and
Mm-hmm.
culture in her. So that's the major difference between the two, I think. But in general, my relationship is decent to pretty good with both.
Do you speak Dutch, Flemish, or is it Cantonese?
Cantonese, yeah.
What language do you speak with them?
With my mom, I only speak Dutch.
Oh,
Well,
okay.
when I was small, um, when she started to speak Cantonese, I knew I was in trouble. That was the number one sign. She only spoke Cantonese to me when she was trying to when I did something wrong, basically.
Mm-hmm.
Um, Whereas my dad, as I said before, he doesn't really speak Dutch, or he doesn't speak Dutch at all. So with him, it's more of a mix of Cantonese, English, Dutch, trying to figure my way, because my Cantonese is not that good anymore.
Mm-hmm. I feel like, I mean, of course, language is the main way of communication.
Mm-hmm.
And I have this thing where, with my grandparents, they speak German to me and I answer in Italian. And I feel like there is a lot of meaning that just gets lost because
Oh yeah,
I want to talk to them and I want to share my life, but they understand
definitely.
Italian, that they can speak it, but it's not their first language. And
Mm-hmm.
there is just like a lot of things that get lost in translation, like literally
Yeah,
they get lost in translation. Do you have the
I
same
think
thing with your parents?
oh yeah, definitely. I think language, because um, I used to be a journalist, so language is very important to me,
Mm-hmm.
and I think language is all about nuance, and especially if it's language about emotions and feelings and certain things and messages you try to convey, you want to convey. And like I said, with my mom, that's not the language problem is not as big with my mom, pure language wise,
Yeah.
linguistically. But with my dad, like the extent of the conversations we have go as far as the typical small talk.
Yeah.
Um, if we're talking about Cantonese, so more if I want to convey certain feelings, if I want to convey even my job, if I want to explain to him what it is that I do,
Mm-hmm.
being the communication business, it's very hard to explain even that to when you don't speak the language adequately.
Yeah. Yeah, no, that's true. And I also feel like I was talking yesterday to a friend and I was saying like, you know, there is a lot of already miscommunication between our generation and an older generation just because
Right.
we are living in another world, goes faster, there are
Mm-hmm.
like
Mm-hmm.
social media, it's a different way of communication that we have. But then if you put culture in it, it's a whole other layer. And I feel
Oh
like
yeah.
it becomes so much more, because there is like some words that maybe our parents don't understand because it's the slang of the young people, whatever.
Mhm.
But then there is also like a whole part of context and really culture and tradition that they don't really understand, and it
Right.
becomes very, I feel like sometimes it becomes really a burden, because you're like, oh, how do I say this to them that they really get me?
Yeah. I think it's yeah. I think it's one of the main sources of frustration amongst immigrant kids. Let's call it
Mm-hmm.
that for now. Because I noticed the same, not just with me, but with all of my cousins. Most of us were in a certain in a similar situation where we grew up in Belgium, but our parents don't really speak the language.
Mm-hmm.
Um, it's very hard to communicate about the things that are important sometimes. Um, and as you said before, on top of that, you have the cultural elements.
Yeah.
And one thing which is true about Chinese stereotypes, I think, about Chinese culture, is the distance between parents and their children. So not only do you have the language barrier, but you also have like the more distant relationship. So it's twice as hard to
Mm-hmm.
talk about um, stuff that's already hard to talk about.
Yeah, and then above language, there is of course also like the whole society you grew up in. Like in your household, there is a certain
Mhm.
culture and a certain way of communicating. Then when you
Yeah,
get out and you're with your friends and you're at school, it's another
I have
way.
to switch. Yeah,
Yeah.
because what you said before about like the immigrant kids having that automatic reflex
Mm-hmm.
to switch in cultural behavior, let's call it that. Um, I think it's a good thing, but it's also kind of it's sort of an autopilot. And I think for
Yeah.
some kids, it's hard to um, how do you say it, to give it context, to give it a place. um, I can imagine for me as well, it could be really hard and frustrating um, to 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 be able to do one thing at school and not being able to do the same thing at home
Mm-hmm.
because you have that cultural difference.
I feel
And I
like.
think when you're young, you're not always able to process that. Like for example, when I'm with my parents or with my dad, I don't really say a lot. Not
Mm-hmm.
because there's not a lot I want to say, because um, I know in advance that it's gonna be a hassle. Not even a hassle. Like oftentimes I already know I'm not going to be able to convey the message, so I
Yeah.
don't. So
Mm-hmm.
I give up. Like when you're younger, you still try, but eventually you kind of give up, and that is mostly or almost 100% my fault, I think. Because like you said, there's a certain effort that you can do, like the example you gave from um, like following language lessons.
Mm-hmm.
It's something I have been considering, not only to be able, well, the main reason would be to be able to better communicate with my dad or my family in general. But also the older I get, the more I start to value like my own
Oh yeah.
culture and
Yeah.
roots. So to be able to speak the language better would be the same to me as being able to understand the culture and my roots better. I think
Yeah.
it's a prerequisite to be able to learn about your own culture. Um, so yeah, I think that's a very, very good solution, and one that I have been considering for some time now.
Mm-hmm. I often think like parents also carry just this, pain is a very like strong word, but just, yeah, kind of feeling, as you said, like your dad doesn't really have like friends in Belgium, or like Flemish friends. uh,
Hmm.
and I feel like parents, I mean, obviously when you move to a new place, a new country, you look for people that I mean are alike.
Yeah,
So
definitely.
especially in Antwerp, there is like a big Asian community, right?
Yeah, for sure.
So I feel like then our parents are, they stay in this community because they already had to go through a lot, so it's
Hmm.
easier for them to at least friends and just like their social life to keep it
Yeah,
close,
of
in
course,
small
of course. Yeah.
community.
I I've had this discussion with a lot of my white friends.
Mm-hmm.
I often get the question like, why do, in this case, the Asian community, but in general, like foreign communities in Antwerp, why don't they mingle more with the local
Yeah.
authorities and communities, like with the Flemish, the Antwerp communities? And my answer is always the same, like just what you described right now. I think it's a very natural reflex
Yeah.
when you arrive in a foreign country where you do not speak the language, you do not know the customs, you do not know anyone except people from your own country who
Yeah.
traveled there before, who have been there before you. So my natural reflex would to go to those people probably, and ask for advice, for tips. And I think that phenomenon has been going on for so long that all those communities have grown together and have started to, like, for the Asian community, you have Asian schools, you have Asian doctors, you have Asian
Mm-hmm.
supermarkets. Like, what's the value? Like, if you just look at it black and white, why would my dad put an effort into integrating in um, the more Belgian white community if
Yeah,
it
of
does
course.
not have anything more to offer than the Asian community, in his eyes, from his perspective?
Of course. Also, then, getting out from your community, even if um, he wanted to, I mean, he can, but I feel like there is a lot of discrimination. Like, maybe you say like one wrong, or like maybe your Dutch is not perfect, so
Mm-hmm.
then you get looks, and then why would you go through that if you're ready, if you're already comfortable in your community? Getting out of
Exactly.
the community is very hard. For us, it was different because I mean, we were already in this country and we grew up here,
Mm-hmm.
so we know how it
Yeah.
works. But for our parents to take the step to get out of the community,
Yeah, yeah, yeah,
it's just
definitely.
heavy.
Yeah, because especially for my dad, like he works in the kitchen like 6 days a
Hmm.
week, 12 hours a day. You don't really come into contact with Belgian people,
Hmm.
with Flemish people. Um, so for him, the like the distance is ginormous to be
Yeah,
able
of
to
course.
bridge that. And like, let's be honest, Dutch is not an easy language.
Hmm.
It's actually, it's a very, very hard language. um, but just to be clear, I think like it has to be a two-way street. um, and I think moving towards integration but also keeping your own roots would be the
Yeah.
ideal scenario. I do believe that keeping communities as closed off as they are now in a lot of situations is still gonna negatively impact Antwerp society as a whole in the long term,
Yeah.
because it
Yeah.
takes longer.
I feel like we, like our generation that grew up with different cultures, we're in the middle and we're like, come on, let's bring it
Yeah,
together. But
like
yeah, it's hard.
I feel that our generation, as much of an effort that we try to put in, and that is a lot. I feel like a lot
Hmm.
of people in our generation like put their hearts and souls into it. Even still, I think this is going to be kind of a segue to
Yeah.
a better like segue to the next generation, where intergenerational communication is going to
Hmm.
be more evident, more approachable.
Hmm.
um, I feel like we are like laying the foundation is probably a better way of phrasing it.
I have a younger brother, and I feel like he is the person I can communicate best about these things
Mm-hmm.
because he knows how we grew up. So if I say like, oh, grandma said this and that, he gets
Right.
right away like the nuances of what I'm saying, and it's not like
Yeah.
what it's not confusing. He knows right away what I'm meaning. So yeah, I don't know if you have the same with your siblings, how it is.
Um, I think it's important to know that I'm 12 years older,
Mm-hmm.
so the sibling relationship is kind of different than where you're only like 3, 4, 5, 6 years older. I think it's
Yeah.
almost like more of an uncle status. Also, I was already pretty independent by the time that they were old enough to have these kind of conversations with.
Yeah.
Um, but I do have that relationship that you are describing now with my cousins,
Oh,
because
okay.
on my dad's side, we have a pretty big family. My dad has 7 siblings. Um, and three of those cousins I actually grew up with, and we're around the same age. We kind of grew up the same way. So it's with them that I have the most connection in terms of, oh, did you hear what Auntie X or
Mm-hmm.
Granny did or said, and how about that? Or certain like nuances between Western and Asian culture, things
Yeah.
that I can't really discuss with my Flemish friends. I can easily like discuss with them. That is very natural to them,
Mm-hmm.
because you have the same upbringing. So
What's
yeah, I definitely have that, and I definitely need that too. I was raised mostly by my mom growing up,
yeah.
and she had a very Western mindset, and to her, embracing the Belgian culture, integrating, assimilating was essential to my future.
Mm-hmm.
So it's not as much as trying to throw away your own culture, your own roots, but more like, we're in this country, we live with these people. You have to integrate to be able to have a stable financial future in this country.
Yeah.
That was kind of the mindset. I think, I don't know if it was consciously or unconsciously, but that was the mindset.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why I think I grew up in a mostly white schools. Always, most of my friends um, are white. So yeah, that was thinking. I think the main component of growing up for me. And when most of your friends and your environment is white, is Flemish, you don't see yourself as something else
Mm-hmm.
when you're young. Like for me, it wasn't that obvious that I was different when I grew up.
Yeah.
There were certain moments that it became obvious. Like there's always small jokes. Obviously, it's definitely 20 years ago, um, and those are small moments that you get confronted with the fact that you are different. Um, but I think you don't really process that at a young age. Like you
Mm-hmm.
kind of put it away in the back of your head and you go on with your life, because it's nothing, like, to be clear, it was nothing life threatening, it was nothing dramatic, it was always like small jokes, so I didn't think much of it. It was only until I went to it wasn't until I went to uni and came in contact with more cultures and started to think more for myself, that I started to realize, okay, um, there is an actual difference between me and my friends, and
Mm-hmm.
that's fine. Um, and that's when I started to show more interest in where I come from and what those differences are, and in what way that I can merge those two, like you said.
Maybe that's the big difference between us, like our generation, our parents' generation, because I feel our parents, they came to a new country and they also had to, hear like these jokes and
Mhm.
the looks and whatever, but they were trying to build a future.
Yeah,
So they were
definitely.
like, okay, whatever, I'm not gonna listen to it, I'm gonna ignore
Hmm.
it. But
Yeah.
our generation now, it's speaking up about this, and it's like, no, this is not okay, and we are really talking about this. While our parents, I mean, then of course, if you know that you're different and you're coming in a new country, and then everybody is kind of against you, you're like, yeah,
Hmm.
I'm not gonna fight against this, I'm trying to lead my life and
Exactly.
have a better
Yeah, yeah.
future. So I'm just gonna ignore it. And I feel like also a lot of parents, um, I'm not gonna say that don't agree, but when they hear like their children like really speaking up about racism and being like, no, this is not okay, I feel like a lot of parents are like, but it's
Not a
okay.
priority. It's not a
Yeah,
priority.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. And
exactly.
we are now seeing it in a totally different way. Like, this
Hmm.
is not okay, like,
Hmm.
period.
Yeah. I feel like this is a hot take sometimes to some people, but I feel like us speaking up about this, like, for example, one of my key points to talk about is diversity in media.
Mm-hmm.
um, I can understand how my parents, and they do see it as like a first world problem, literally. I think it's a luxury that you and I are able to do these kind of
Oh
talks,
yeah, of course.
and to be able to talk about it, to be able to think and reflect about it. Because like you said before, the priority of your parents, maybe of my parents, definitely was just to put it dramatically, to survive, to build a
Yeah,
future.
yeah.
Their priority was getting bread on the table. That's a priority for all people. I realize that,
Mm-hmm.
all for Belgians as well. But for them, like, I think they felt an enormous pressure,
Mm-hmm.
um, to have something to build on, because they had nothing. They were, like you said, the first people to arrive in a foreign country,
Yeah.
and they knew they were going to have children, and they knew that they would have to build a future for them as well. And to them, like, being represented in the media, having one more actor with the same roots, they couldn't care less. Like, I'm 100%
Yeah.
sure of that. They honestly could not care less. But for us, like, I would like to hope so, for most of us, having bread on the table is already something that we have. Like, I'll speak for myself, but I did have a roof on top of my head. I did have
Mm-hmm.
a decent education. I had all those things. So for me, it was just a luxury, more time, more space. I think especially mental space to
Yeah.
reflect about what it means to be better represented in media, and what it does to us as immigrant children, what it does to our characters, how the way we build relationships, the way we perceive locals. I think it's immensely important, but it is still a luxury.
Yeah, of course. I mean, they didn't have time to think about these
Yeah.
things. They didn't have time to think like, oh wait, I'm watching a series. There is
Mhm.
no person of color. Who
Who
cares? They're
cares?
they're yeah, they're
Yeah.
thinking about like really building a future. And we now have so many resources. We have social media. We can like really um, let our voice be heard. So we also do have, and of course because of their work now we have the time to think about these things, and we have the peace of mind um,
Definitely.
to really discuss these things.
Hmm.
And I mean it's going very slow, but I do see a little bit of a change in the media. They're getting like more and more inclusive, very slowly, but it's
Very slowly, but step by
very
step.
slowly. But yeah, I mean, you wrote a piece about the movie Farewell, uh,
Hmm.
where Aquafina, she's an Asian American woman, um,
Hmm.
and the grandma is sick, so they go back to Hong Kong. I don't know if it's Hong Kong or China.
It's China.
China.
Yeah. Hmm.
And there is a big like culture clash in
Yeah.
the family because she's like she's dying, she should know, and the rest of the family's like,
Right.
you know. And I feel
Right.
like, I mean, you then said like you went into this identity crisis. Did your parents see this movie? Did they have the same feeling?
No, actually, they didn't. I think, well, I'm, aside from being an Asian European journalist, I'm also kind of a movie buff. So to
Mm-hmm.
me, it was a very obvious choice to watch this movie. But I think for my parents, it's kind of a slow movie, I think.
Oh, okay.
You know what I mean? It's
Yeah.
kind of not that edgy, but it's a bit edgy. So I don't think they would enjoy it as much, not because of the content, but because of the way it is paced and different, like, geeky
Mm-hmm.
stuff. Um, However, I do think it would be very interesting for them to see from another person's perspective, from an American a
Yeah.
person's perspective, how important and how relevant that clash is between young and old, between West and
Mm-hmm.
Asia. Um, because yeah, I think it's the same for you. It's something I still um, feel almost every day.
Yeah.
That difference.
Yeah.
And it's very hard to put in words, but it's about the very, very small stuff most of the time, because
Yes.
people who are watching this, they might think about something very life-changing, dramatic, but most of the time those culture clashes are about um, when to take off your shoes in the house, when the way you cook certain things or preserve certain foods, like very, very small
Mm-hmm.
everyday stuff. Because I don't know if you saw it in one of the Bayesian episodes, but one of my biggest reliefs ever was the discovery of subtle Asian traits, which is a
Mm-hmm.
Facebook community, a Facebook group, which with millions of Western Asians. And that was the moment I discovered that group was the moment I realized, oh, I'm not alone at all.
Yeah.
Like before, it was my cousins that I discussed like these small cultural differences with, but all of a sudden there were millions of other people that had exactly the same stuff. So now I daily see about 10, 20, 100 memes about Asian tiger moms, which is
Yeah.
awesome. To go back to the media thing, like I've always been very interested in journalism, in movies, in television, but that the relatable aspect is something that I still miss, which is
Mm.
normal. It's not gonna change that quickly, and I'm not sure if it has to change drastically, to be
Mm-hmm.
clear. But that's why I often got my fix from like Korean or Chinese fiction,
Yeah.
because they even though it's a different country, there's a lot of shared values,
Mm-hmm.
and those are things, principles, values, ethics that I sometimes miss in Western fiction.
Did you grow up more in a Belgian way? Like, how is your household? Is it divided or is it more Hong Kong?
um I think in terms of pop culture, it was, I started to grow up with mostly American pop culture,
Oh,
as a lot
okay.
of people do.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it stayed that way for a very, very long time, with the exception of anime. I've always
Mm-hmm.
watched a lot of anime growing up. Like I always had videotapes of Dragon Ball as a small kid, so that was something I definitely took with me. Um, but it wasn't until I don't know, about 14, 15, 16 that I started to actively look for
Yeah.
more Asian pop culture. Um, but even now, like if it's not possible for me to only watch Korean, Japanese, or Chinese show, to be clear, there's a
Mm-hmm.
very distinct difference. I'm gonna call it 50-50. I'm not sure if it's 50-50. I don't think you can put a number on it.
Yeah,
There's
no.
definitely a very, very big Western part in me as well, that is just as important as the Asian part.
Mm-hmm.
So a movie like The Farewell, or a recent Netflix film was Over the Moon, which was about
Mm-hmm.
Chinese holiday, but it was a kind of a Western production, like the marriage between Western and Asian creators.
Yeah.
Those deliver like the most beautiful and relatable results to me personally.
Yeah. So then did you did you ever live in Hong Kong? Or do you go there
Yes.
often? Oh, you lived in Hong Kong.
I used to go there every year, but that was more of a holiday, because it was like 2-3 weeks.
Okay.
But I lived there for 9 months in 2015, 2016.
Oh, nice. And
Yes,
did you feel home there? Was it home to you, or was it just like I know this, but nah, okay.
it's a very good question. I think there were a lot of aspects that I did feel at home,
Yeah.
like the most obvious being the way I look. I
Hmm.
think that's the most obvious one. Um, but in the end, I think after maybe half a year, I did feel some sort of, I don't want to call it a longing, um, but I did start to realize that was not my home.
Oh,
Um,
really?
I did, yeah. And this is gonna sound very, very Antwerp, and gonna sound very, very arrogant, but as much. It wasn't Belgium as much that I missed,
Mhm.
but more Antwerp. Like
Really,
that's
the city.
Yeah, exactly. That's like the place I feel um, that's home to me.
Yeah.
Like really, like I like to. Don't get me wrong, I love to travel, but to live somewhere, I've never, and I've lived in a couple of places. There's never been a place where I felt more at home than Antwerp
Hmm.
to this date.
But I think that's also, everybody always asks like, where are you from? And then you have to say a country. But a country, I mean, even if we think about Belgium, there is Antwerp, and it's, you know, Flanders, you speak
Mm-hmm.
Dutch, it's one culture, and then you have like I don't know, like a city in Wallonia, and it's a whole
Mm-hmm.
different, like, you can't
Yeah.
come from a country. It's so broad. Like,
Yeah.
imagine
It's
if
just
somebody says,
borders put by someone, decided by someone.
yeah, exactly. But if you say a city, if you come from a city, it's so
Right.
much more character.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It gives so
Yeah.
much more meaning to it.
Yeah. 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 Just try to say against someone from West Flanders that you're from Antwerp, and they will have a very distinct, certain image of you all
Yeah,
of a sudden.
yeah.
And they're not completely wrong, I think. But it's, I don't know. It's like, first of all, I'm a city person,
Hmm.
that in itself, and I grew up in Antwerp, so obviously I'm gonna feel more at home. But it's also I don't know, like the diversity in certain neighborhoods. Like you have the gritty city feeling that you have in a lot of cities, but at the same time you have a lot of very warm communities, um, where you feel at home very easily once you get to know them.
Yeah.
Because we talked before about the closed off communities,
Hmm.
which is still true. But if you've long lived here long enough and you know the neighborhoods, you know certain people, um, I feel like it always feels like coming home for me, like
Hmm.
arriving to Antwerp. And when people ask me as what to identify yourself, the first thing that pops into my mind is still the fact that I'm from Antwerp.
Hmm. That's funny. So you didn't, you know, it wasn't like you went back to Hong Kong, or you went to Hong Kong, you were like, oh my God, this is my home. These are my roots. Like, you didn't have that feeling.
I mean, I loved it. Like, Hong
Hmm.
Kong is an amazing city, but I'm not sure if, no, wait, that's not true. I do love it, and it is kind of like coming home. It really
Okay.
is. Um, but I did grow up here in
Yeah.
Belgium, in Antwerp, and um, I think there's too many structural differences between the two, um, to feel at home entirely in Hong Kong. And then I'm talking specifically about how crowded it is,
Hmm.
and the um, how commercialized everything is, and how fast paced the society there is, and the
Yeah.
way of life. And that is almost the opposite of Flanders to me. It's how I feel. I feel like Flanders has a very slow and peaceful pace of living.
Okay. So do you have something to plug? I don't know, some account, some project that you have, anything?
Not necessarily at the moment, but I would definitely recommend people with an Asian background to check out Bayesian, the account on Instagram and on YouTube, for certain for 3 episodes of podcasts that we made
Hmm.
about our heritage. Definitely also check out Christina de Witte, or Crostens, um, Instagram page, because she makes a lot of very relatable cartoons and content, about having a mixed culture and heritage.
Yeah.
Maybe a last plug, is Pete Wu. He's a Dutch Chinese writer,
Hmm.
who wrote a book called The Banana Generation,
Okay.
some months ago. Um, I think it was the first book, and the first book that was so, how to say it, how so relevant and relatable to me about Asian Western cultural differences.
Yeah.
So definitely check it out. Yeah.
Okay.
And
Nice. I'm
thanks for
gonna check
the
it too.
conversation. Thanks for the invite.
Thank you.
Success.
Bye.
Bye.